Welcome to Capitalize Your Finances, the podcast that's your ultimate guide to mastering personal finances and unlocking the secrets of entrepreneurship. Each week, we dive into the world of personal finance and business development and have fascinating conversations with industry experts, seasoned entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who share their insights, strategies, and stories to help you get ahead in life. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur looking to scale your business or someone just starting out on your financial path, this podcast is your go-to resource for inspiration and actionable insights.
Welcome back to Capitalize Your Finances. As always, I'm your host, Christopher Panayiotou, certified financial planning professional, the Cap in Capitalize. And on today's episode, we are going to get into the concept of, are you saving enough, and how to determine how much to save if you are saving too much, which again is a good problem to have. But before we get into the episode, the free advice for the week. Real estate could be the easiest investment to understand and analyze, but that does not mean it is the best option. And I wanted to bring this up really quick because I've been getting a lot of questions and feedback on what I should do with real estate. Should I invest in real estate? Is it right for me? And real estate, easiest investment to understand. You live and die by cap rates. Cap rates are essentially what you are earning net of tax after fees and all of that on your investment, your return on your investment. So in theory, you want to buy real estate when cap rates are really high, and then you want to sell real estate when cap rates are really low. I'll give you an example. If you bought a property for $100,000 and the cap rate is 15, which would be crazy, that means you're earning $15,000 a year. Now, let's say that income just stays stagnant, and then in 5 years, your cap rate goes from a 15 down to a 5 or even lower. Well, that means, relatively speaking, your income, because it's flat, your property value has grown. So relatively, you're not earning as much in income. So that means that, again, hypothetically, you've maximized the value within that real estate holding. So at that point, it's probably time to move on and look into a different investment. That's real estate 101 for you. But I'm telling you, real estate, on average, is not going to be the number one place in terms of where you're earning the maximum return. And I'm just going to leave it at that. That's your free advice for the week. Now let's get into the question you've all been dying to know since you clicked on this episode and are wondering if you are indeed saving enough for retirement. And what I wanted to do with this episode is I want to break this episode down into 3 sections. And the first one is going to be how to find out how much you will need in retirement. And that's regardless if you're saving enough or not. This will give you a baseline number, and I really should say number in quotes, and then you can work backwards to present day. The second section is going to be understanding how to calculate what you are going to have based on your current saving habits today, as well as understanding how to invest that money to get as great of an outcome as humanly possible. In order to do this, you are going to need to know your net worth. So gathering your assets and your liabilities, what you owe, is going to be key. And I'm also going to touch on this section, how to calculate when your debts are going to be paid off, as this can further help you understand your number in retirement that much more accurately. Because for the majority of you, if you have a mortgage or credit card debt or student loans, things of that nature, eventually those are going to be paid off. And when those are paid off, you won't need as much money coming in the door to figure out your expense needs. And then the third and final section is going to be in between today in retirement. Since life is never constant, I'm going to give you tips on how to give yourself a margin of safety in regards to pay raises, as this is going to give you more comfort in regards to making it to the promised lands of retirement and that number. So in the past, in past episodes, a ton of past episodes, I've discussed how to break down different long-term investment options and utilizing strategies like the endowment model. But for the sake of today's episode, I'm going to be purely discussing rates of return in blanket statements. So, for example, long-term investments such as XYZ could earn X percent over time, et cetera. So if you're trying to understand different types of investments and what they earn, as well as the endowment model, which is a strategy I use for some of my clients as well as myself, go back and listen to Capitalize Your Finances with the endowment model. So let's get into section 1, how to find out how much you will need in retirement. So the first step will be to take your monthly expenses today, and I'll get to retirement in a second, but take your monthly expenses today and multiply that number by 12. This is going to get you your annual expenses, and it's going to be easier later on in the calculation to get your answer you're desiring. The second step is going to be to properly inflate that expense number by an appropriate inflation benchmark between now and when you get to retirement, or when you think you're about to retire. In order to do this, I actually have with me, if you're watching, an HP 12C calculator. If you are listening in and you're not watching, there are a ton of free tools online where you can Google free HP 12C calculator and pull it up. And I actually, in this episode, I'm going to teach you how to use it. And for those of you that have never used a financial calculator, it may be intimidating, especially because it is kind of clunky if you're not used to using it. It's funny, now that I use an HP 12C calculator in my work, and I've done so for years, it's more difficult for me to use an everyday calculator. So I've got it backwards. But once you get the hang of it, muscle memory, it's very, very, very easy. And you're not going to need to know a lot of what's on this calculator. There's only a few buttons that you're going to need to understand, but those few buttons, I'm not exaggerating, will dictate the future for you with pretty much 100% accuracy, barring if you have changes in your life, but then you just re-update the calculations. Now, as far as what to inflate your inflation rate at, since 2000, and I looked this up before this episode, the average inflation rate has been 2.24%. So to keep the margin of safety, let's round that to 3% and take that out however many years until you retire. This will give you your future annualized spending rate. So for example, and I'm going to use my calculator right now. Let's say that you're spending $4,000 a month. So that's $4,000. And then what you're going to do is you're going to click the PV button, that's present value. And what that does, actually, let me backtrack. You're going to take $4,000, times it by 12. That gets you your $48,000 a year. Now what you're going to do is hit present value, PV. What that tells you is in today's dollar amounts, that is what right now you are spending. Or if we're trying to calculate a return on investment, that is what you're starting with. What we're going to do is the payment number we're going to say is 0 because we're not going to add into it. We're just trying to see what your expenses will look like in the future. And let's say that you're earning a 3% return on that. You're going to click I, which is your interest rate, after you hit 3. And then you're going to hit the number of years. And let's just say it's going to be 20 years from now. So you're going to hit 20 and you're going to hit N. N is number of years. You're going to click FV, future value, which is going to tell you what your expenses are going to look like in the future. That means that in the future, you are going to be needing to spend, or you will be spending, an equivalent of $86,693 at that time. So 48 grand a day at that period of time, 20 years down the road, will be about $86,693. Now, once you know that, what you want to do is you want to figure out how much you're going to need in terms of money invested, like your liquid net worth, to comfortably live in retirement based on your expense needs. So this is not a perfect science, but there is a widely recognized rule in our industry called the 4% rule. And I've mentioned this a couple of times in the past, but I got to give a shout out to my boy, Bill Bengen, the founder, the godfather of the 4% rule. He actually came back on our, he came on our show, I think in 2021, and we talked about it a lot. Bill is fantastic. And Bill, back in 1991, came out with this concept of if you take 4% of your portfolio every year in retirement, there is a 95% chance, approximately, that your money will outlive you, because you don't want to outlive your money. So even though it's not perfect, it gives you a rough idea. So take that number, in this case, $86,693. You divide it by 4%, and that would mean that at that point, you would need to have about $2.2 million in retirement. Now, I'm going to say a couple things here, because some of you listening in are like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy. Couple caveats. One, it does not account for the fact that when you get to retirement and you have Social Security coming in, you actually won't need to have as much saved up, because you will need to have whatever you need to get to the $4,000 a month minus what your Social Security will be spent. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds of all of that in this episode, because it can get really technical really quick, because it depends on where you're at in your life. If you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s and 60s, and you're not taking Social Security, but you could, and you're pretty close to it. But the moral of the story is that number that I just told you assumes that you're not getting any Social Security or pension, or if you have a rental or whatever the case may be. So just know that this is a good number to still strive for, but it's probably going to be a little bit less. So now you have a baseline. I also want you, before we go to the commercial break, I want to say that that lump sum number, whatever it is, it may look intimidating, but I want you to take a deep breath and marinate on that number, because when I come back, I'm going to relieve all of that stress, and you'll know exactly why after the break. Don't go anywhere. Stick around.
Are you ready to transform the way you approach sales? This episode is sponsored by the second book in the Capitalize series, Capitalize Your Sales, the all-in-one sales framework that saves you from ever struggling again and teaches you how to sell with sincerity, which dives deep into the art and science of driving sustainable growth. Packed with strategies that go beyond surface-level techniques, this book will help you understand what it takes to truly connect with clients, build long-term relationships, and close deals. Whether you're looking to fine-tune your sales craft or break through to the next level, Capitalize Your Sales offers a roadmap to success designed for today's fast-paced business world. Head on over to your favorite bookstore, order today, and start capitalizing your sales immediately. And now, back to the episode.
Welcome back from the commercial break. We're going to get into section 2, which is understanding how to calculate what you are going to have based on your current savings habits today. Because again, right before the commercial break, I told you how to calculate what you were going to need when you're in retirement. And so now we're going to figure out what you're actually going to have based on what you're doing. So the first thing, I want you to gather all of your assets and liabilities. So your 401ks, your IRAs, your mortgage, your student loans, you name it. And this includes how much. So not only do I want you to get your assets and liabilities, I also want you to know what you are saving per month, or if it's a debt, paying off per month. For your debts, I want to make sure you look up your interest rates. And this is going to be extremely critical, both from a purely financial perspective, but also an emotional one. And once you have all of those, I first want you to look at your liabilities and use this calculator accordingly. And I briefly want to teach you how to calculate when debts are going to be paid off, approximately. Okay, this isn't an exact science, but here's the thing. You don't have to be exactly right. I would much rather be approximately right than precisely wrong. So let's say that hypothetically you have a student loan and you have $40,000. Okay. You're going to click $40,000 on your calculator and you're going to select the PV button, present value. Now, eventually you want this thing to go to zero. So I want you to press 0, future value. And let's say that your interest rate on your student loans is 4.5%. I'm making this up as I go. So you've got the interest rate, 4.5%, and then let's say that you're paying at, let's make it reasonable here, $500 a month. So you're going to do 500, enter, 12 times, that gets you 6,000. Then you're going to hit the CHS button. That's the change sign because you want it to be negative because again, we're paying it down to 0 over time. Then you're going to hit payment because that's where it's going. You hit N, you're going to pay it off in about 9 years. Boom. So you're going to do that for all of your debts and get an idea, okay? Now, the reason why this is key is at that time, you know that you can take your free cash flow and you can reinvest it back into your assets like your 401k or IRAs or investment accounts, which will further assist you to getting to that magical number we mentioned right before the break. In terms of growth rates for your investments, I want you to use an appropriate long-term rate of return, which for the sake of simplicity, I would use between 6 to 8%, depending on your comfort level with investing and personal finance in general. And now that you know when certain debts will be paid off, you can then know what your asset is going to be at that time by doing calculations. I'm not going to go through line by line, but at that point, you will know what your present value is. You can further increase your payment back to what you're getting in assets, and that will further compound and speed up the compounding of you getting to that number. Now, let's look into the last section of this, because I know you're probably thinking, wow, is it really that easy? I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's simple. And in between today and retirement, life is never constant. We all know this. I want to give you some tips on how to give yourself margin of safeties in regards to pay raises, as this is going to, it's going to give you more comfort in regards to making it to that promised lands of retirement. And the first tip I wanted to give, and it's more of a mental tip than black and white, but it's arguably the most valuable. Take a deep breath and know that you're going to be okay and you're going to figure it out. If you're younger with at least 20 plus years until retirement, you got to know you're more likely than not, you're going to get pay increases. You're going to get some bonuses. Maybe you have a career change where you're just in this new stratosphere of building wealth. You'll have 401k matches along the way, profit sharing. Maybe you have a pension. That's very rare today, but you may have it. So you can look at this in a couple ways. If you're getting all of these pay raises, because again, when I'm doing the calculation and you're doing the calculation on your calculator, that means everything's constant. We're not giving like a increase to how much you're contributing every single year to your net worth. This gives you just a bare bones idea. So if you're getting those increases every year and you're putting more and more and more and more in as your money, continues to grow more and more and more, you can look at this in two ways. You could, on one hand, you could say you don't need to necessarily save as much from a percentage perspective. On the other side, you may not need to earn as high of a return on your investment to get to that target number. So if you're closer to retirement and if you're a ways off on that number, just start basic and get the easy wins out of the way. Simply eliminating those high interest debts, that's a major win from a debt perspective, as well as your cash flow, which will lead to a growing of your assets, which is also a growth of your net worth. If you're closer to retirement, this is the second tip. I'd say within 10 years, and you know what you're going to be getting in terms of Social Security income, or you're pretty dang certain, regardless of when you turn on your Social Security income, know that you can rest assured that whatever that number is, it'll be in fact smaller because you can subtract that Social Security basically from every single month. And I'm actually going to use an example here. So let's say that someone comes into my office and they need $6,000 a month and they're freaking out because that's 72 grand a year divided by 4%, and they need $1.8 million. And it's actually really common. I run into this all the time. And people think, man, how am I going to do this? Like, I don't have that. Well, first take a chill pill. So you may need $6,000 a month to live, but as far as what your portfolio needs to pay, that's a different story, because you're getting $2,000 a month, hypothetically, from Social Security. So you really only need $4,000 a month. So instead of needing that, $1.8 million, you really only need $1.2 million. That's $600,000 less. That's a heck of a lot more doable. So I'm saying that because, unfortunately, people get so wrapped up in their heads of, oh my gosh, I need to get this number. I need to get this number. No, you don't. You need to know what you're spending. You need to understand what you're getting from Social Security, and you simply work backwards. The third tip, don't invest on risk tolerance. Invest and plan prudently. I'm going to give you a real example. We had someone come into our office, actually a client, still a client to this day, love them to death. And this person had a retirement plan. And this person had, let's say $400,000 in a retirement plan. In and of itself, that I'm not saying that's not a lot of money, but that's not good or bad. It's just that is what it is. And I'm sitting down, I'm thinking, okay, 400,000. Look at the statement, and it was invested in a stable value fund. I thought, okay, maybe this person changed it right before retirement. So I asked the client, and the client said, no, I'd been there for 25, 30, I think it was 25 or 30 years. I'd put my money in, and because I am a conservative investor and what I was told was to invest conservatively, I had this money invested in this fund the entire time. Now, had this person invested based on prudency and knowing what I talk about in my book a ton, what I've said about on my show a ton, that $400,000 should have been around $1.45 million. Here lies the question. Did she invest according to her risk tolerance? Yes, she did. Or he. Or both of them. But was that the right decision based on the plan. There lies the issue. And you can marinate on that one. The fourth tip, in terms of reevaluating your investments, in terms of prepping for retirement, and this one's a little controversial, but unless you're about, 3 to 5 years away from retiring, chances are that you are going to want to stick to revving that growth engine. There is an exception, and the exception to that would be if you can calculate that you are already set in terms of what you need from a retirement standpoint. You are going to want to allocate your plan accordingly so that you can retire today, and then anything you invest further into your plan between now and retirement day goes straight into your long-term portion of your portfolio. The reason for that is very simple. If you have everything set aside for today and you don't need anything more for today, by definition, from a risk standpoint, you can risk all of the rest of your free cash flow for tomorrow. And that does it for today's episode on Are You Saving Enough, and how to determine if you are saving enough and what to do if you're saving too much when it comes to retirement. You know where to get a hold of me at this point. As always, I'm your host, Christopher A. Paniotu, certified financial planning professional, the Cap and Capitalize. And until next time, keep capitalizing. Take care. As always, thank you for joining me today. If you have questions about today's episode or any personal finance questions, please reach out to me at Cap and Capitalize on Instagram, Chris at capitalizeyourfinances.com, or via our website, capitalizepodcast.com. If you want more Capitalize Your Finances content, head on over to capitalizepodcast.com and check out our blog, free resources, book, and online course. As always, I'm your host, Christopher A. Paniotu, certified financial planning professional, the Cap and Capitalize. And until next time, keep capitalizing.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. This material was gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. These materials are provided for general information and educational purposes based upon publicly available information from sources believed to be reliable. The information in these materials may change at any time and without notice, and its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. There is no guarantee that any investment strategy will meet its stated objective. All investments involve risk, including potential loss of principal. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. The information contained herein does not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy securities. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There's no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. Before investing, carefully consider a stable value fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. To obtain a prospectus or summary prospectus which contains this and other information, call your financial advisor. Read the prospectus carefully before investing. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. 401k benefits may be subject to change at your employer, the governing pension, or benefit organization's discretion. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Capitalize Your Finances is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. Christopher Paniotu is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Capitalize Your Finances LLC is a separate entity from LPL Financial. Capitalize Your Finances is not registered as a broker-dealer or investment advisor. CRPS conferred by College for Financial Planning.